You see, John had a problem. He was by a group of people called the Sentinelese, and nobody did anything about it. You see, the Sentinelese are a tribe of people that live on an island that has no contact with the outside world. But see, John's a missionary and thought, okay, if they don't have contact with the outside world, then they don't know about Jesus in them. So John decides to fly to India since it's close to the Sentinelese people's island. Now, this part's important. The Sentinelese people live on an island called North Sentinel Island. This is part of a larger island chain called the Andaman Islands. But see, the people in the Andaman Islands have contact with the outside world. The people in the Sentinel Islands don't have contact with anybody, not even the people in the Andaman Islands. They are literally all by themselves. As soon as John...
Okay, it's an island that has no contact with anyone, right? What I'm confused is, what confuses me is, why would you want to go to a place like that? I don't get it. I guess let's see why.
Just down in India, they say, okay, John, what you here for? John says, I'm just passing through. I'm trying to go to, listen closely, the Andaman Islands. The Indian government says, okay, no problem, but don't go to the Sentinel Islands. That's illegal. You see, the Indian government banned people from going to the Sentinel Island. And you'll find out why in a second. John said, illegal? That's too bad for y'all, because I'm going anyway. John already knew it was illegal. He said, I'm still going. John flies over to the Andaman Island. The people in the Andaman Island said, damn, bro, we don't get too many visitors. What you here for? John said, I see. Can y'all show me where the Sentinel Island's at? They said, we could show you, but we can't take you. It's illegal. He said, of course, of course. They said, there go to Sentinel Island right there. It's across the water from us. John said,
So from what I'm looking at, I see a whole bunch of arrows, and these some long ass arrows, right? So off rip is kind of telling me like, okay, yeah, they're not so friendly. So again, I'm gonna ask, why would someone want to go to a place like that? Let's see.
I bet, I'm finna need a boat. They said, what? He said, I said, LeBron, the goat. John goes over to look for a boat. John finds two fishermen. He said, look, y'all, I need y'all to take me to Sentinel Island. They said, what? You know that's illegal. You gonna pay my bail? John said, I got $400 US. I don't know how much bail costs, but they said, say no more. You have me at US dollars. Hop on the boat. So John and the fishermen approach the Sentinel Island. The Sentinelese people see John and the fishermen pulling up. They start bringing out their bows and arrows, start moving aggressively. They're like, John said, you think they're trying to tell me to pull up? The fisherman said, nah, I think they're trying to tell you to stay here. John said, what y'all know? John hops on a canoe. He gets a little bit closer. Now, at this point, the Sentinelese people, they see. John said, okay, raise the roof. All right, look, check it out, y'all. I got a...
This is all right. That's crazy. So those people warned you, and you still decided to go. That's what I'm getting. So they warned you, kind of with a whole bunch of gestures, and then you're just gonna continue to go, and they got arrows in their hands. Okay, it doesn't make sense to me. Let's see where this goes.
Bible here. I just want to tell y'all about Jesus. That's when the Sentinelese really get to knucking and bucking. They pull out the bows and arrows. They say, ooh, if you come on this island. Ooh. John said, oh, them folk tripping. He leaves. The fisherman said, that's what we was trying to tell you. Them folk like that. John said, so's my Lord and Savior. We're spinning the block and coming back another day. John was not finished. He comes back another day. The fishermen tell him, John, we appreciate the cash, no refunds, but you can't go out there. John said, watch me. John takes the canoe again. He approaches the Sentinelese people. The Sentinelese people look at each other. They say, he's stupid. Stay over there. John said, okay, I'm just going to come a little bit closer. He brings out his Bible and starts to sing. He said, how great is... Boom! They shoot an arrow at bro. But the arrow hits John's Bible and he swims away. And here's where things...
So right there, that was already God telling him, leave. I saved you once and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not a good idea to go over there. Leave those people alone, let them be, and carry on. But let's see what he does.
And the Sentinelese people know that because this British dude, Maurice, in the 1800s, pulled up to the Sentinel Islands, took 4 people. He gave them smallpox. 2 of them, he said, send the other 2 back to the island. The other 2 were coughing, sick. He said, send them back. Maurice then visits a tribe close by the Sentinelese, wipes out the entire population. Maurice said, damn, he wrote in his diary, Yeah, it seems that we get people sick, but we the British since the 1800s, we finna pull up anyway. So after witnessing all this, you can probably understand why the Sentinelese don't want people approaching the island. Now, the crazy
Nah, that makes sense. If the first, whoever went over there the first time did that and pretty much killed the whole population, I don't see why they would trust someone else to come on their island to pretty much cause the same effect. Someone gets on that island and then probably wipe out their whole tribe. Doesn't make sense. I kind of understand why they don't want anyone on their island.
part is, despite witnessing all this, the Sentinelese people seem pretty chill. Indian anthropologists visited them in the 90s. Look at bro shaking hands. He said, what's good with y'all? Hey, we don't want y'all visiting, but like we cool. The Indian people start giving them coconuts. The Sentinelese people like, appreciate y'all. But one of the Sentinelese people brings out some real sharp dough and starts putting it around his heart, saying, One of the Indian anthropologists like, oh, I think we gotta go, y'all. The Sentinelese tribes like, yes, y'all gotta go, but we appreciate y'all, But unlike those Indian anthropologists,
I mean, that's where things get a little crazy because when they started doing all the gesture they was doing, yeah, you should have. I mean, I don't. Again, I'm still trying to understand as far as what was going on in his head. I know you. I mean, I get it. You're doing a missionary job, but man, you got to be careful also. And those people did not look too friendly. So, but let's see what happens.
John didn't take the hint and decides to go a third time. And well, that was that. The next time they found John, he was on the beach of the island. The Indian government pulls up to the Andaman Islands. They said, what happened? They said, John went to Sentinel Island. India said, oh. The United States pulls up. They said, what happened to our citizen? You know we don't play. They said, he went to Sentinel Island. United States said, oh, that's that island where you're not supposed to, India said, yeah. We went over to the island too to get his remains for y'all. Sentinelese people was not having it, but we did manage to get his diary. United States government looked at his diary and said, I know what I'm doing is illegal. If they catch me slipping, don't be mad at the Sentinelese. The United States said, no, we're not mad. The United States and the Indian government figured, well, he was warned a bunch of times. What can you do? In fact, his parents, John's parents, weren't even upset at the Sentinelese or John. They were upset at the evangelical church who they believe radicalized him. In fact, even after he passed, some members of the evangelical church were praising him and he became a martyr in some people's eyes, which to me is actually the wildest part of the story. Can you imagine if your son almost wiped out a group of people, and the church that made him believe all that was okay said, whoo, amen. In fact, to show how in deep John was, he even went to missionary training. Yeah, there's something called missionary training, where a couple folks from the church pretend to be indigenous people. They start speaking a different language, and you pull up trying to convert them. And to show even further how in deep John was, in his diary, he wrote, the Sentinelese Island was Satan's last stronghold. Now, that doesn't mean John saw the Sentinelese as bad people.
That's one of the things, like, it's unfortunate that he lost his life, but like, man, it was like he got a whole bunch of warnings, before it happened. And if the church, did put all that in his head, or again, I get it because, he's doing God's work, but, you got to be careful, especially when God saved you the first time. I felt like he should have just left. And he should have just left and kind of went somewhere else. They got other tribes that you can go to. It's probably way more friendlier. Yeah, he should have just left that tribe alone, especially as far as history hasn't been so good to him, as far as people going over there and then dying. I mean, pretty much killing their tribe and stuff like that. Yeah. So I kind of understand where they're coming from, man. So I do understand why his mom, his parents, and everybody else, why they didn't kind of feel, because, you got a whole bunch of warnings and kind of just didn't, just unfortunate. Rest in peace to him. And let's see what else happened.
It seems he saw them as people he needed to save, which arguably to me is even worse because John was willing to risk an entire population's lives. But as long as they saved, like, it's all good. And on top of that, in John's words in his diary, he was fully prepared to spend his entire life on the island. And that had me thinking, what if they say no? Like, what if the Sentinelese people accepted John on the island, heard him out, and said, nah, we don't want to convert? I was watching this missionary that spent 30 years trying to convert a group of indigenous people. At year 30, they're like, nah, we don't want to do that. He said, hey, yo. He said this completely broke him. They even interviewed the indigenous people. They said, yeah, he was talking about this and that God. We said, what your God look like? He said, some believe he's brown, some believe he's white. We said, you don't know what he looked like? He said, nah. We said, where he live at? He said, the sky. We said, nah, we need somebody on land. We appreciate you, but like, nah. Again, that missionary was with those indigenous people for 30 years. The missionary said as soon as the indigenous people said, like, we good, he realized, yo, what am I doing? He spent 30 years with a group of people. They smiling, breaking bread with him. Whole time he had ulterior motives. He realized, he said, I'm tripping. And on top of that, they said no to his ulterior motives. Bro went straight home. He left the church. Now, at the end of the day, John got for what he believed in. But to me, he was no different than that dude from the 1800s that went to the Sentinelese Island. Because even though both men knew what might happen to the Sentinelese people if they went to the island, they went anyway. Because in their minds, their beliefs were worth risking the Sentinelese people's lives.
Now you see, just what he just said. You know, they felt like their belief was way more and stuff like that was way more important than those people's lives and stuff like I don't get it. You know, you would rather do all of that. You would rather do all of that knowing that you're risking these people's lives. To me is just crazy because it's like you could have possibly wiped out their whole tribe. But like again, like I said, rest in peace to him. Yeah, man, it's crazy.